In his house in Rillier. Dead Cthulhu awaits dreaming.
You ever played D&D before?
No.
What kind of character do you play?
I play a cultist.
But you are a cultist.
I'm growing gills. Gills. My transformation into a deep one has finally begun. Father Dagon be praised.
Rob, we don't see the gills.
The coffee-drinking cultists who meet under the pavilion. I can bring them to you.
If you not bring them to me within 3 days, then you're back on the menu. Got it?
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
It's the cultists of the Yellow King.
We're being infiltrated.
I need a spell to kill Steve.
That escalated.
Kill!
They'll fall fast asleep, and I'll take them to the cult of show.
Are you trying to slip us a Mickey?
As soon as I learn the spell, you are done for.
It's like Twilight, but with a fish.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Heath, and welcome to another morning of the Morning Grind. This time I have here the Fish Do Not Drink Tea mug. I told you I needed that one. This is one of my favorites. If you're a fan of the cultists, there we go, glare off of it. Fish do not drink tea, just as Rob says in the Cultist Season 1. I've got a few more of these mugs that are left over on ravenkeep.net, and I'm shipping them out personally. I can ship them to the United States. If you want one, Rob's Trident and everything. I love it. Hopefully you've got some coffee this morning, or a hot tea, if you do like tea, or hey, even if you need to start this morning with a shot of whiskey, whatever you need. Welcome, because we're going to be talking about different topics in tabletop and fantasy while we enjoy a morning beverage, hang out, and then go be productive for the rest of the day. So, one of the the main thing we're going to be talking about today is I hope we're going to be finishing our discussion of the Fate system, because we've been working on Fate. I've been taking a look at the Fate core system, looking at its strengths, weaknesses, and also particularly with kind of a critical eye from the perspective of game design. And if we were going to be designing our own system, then we would be able to, which I'm thinking about doing, what we might want to modify or what we might want to change. So I think we're going to be taking a look at a little bit of aspects today, and then the action system and specifically combat. Access your light says, which means the Boston Tea Party was a complete waste. Oh, no. Okay. So if you are joining us, a couple of announcements. First of all, tomorrow, this is already Thursday. I can't believe another week has gone by. I have lost a whole lot of time. I've been trying to get myself more productive and, more productive overall, which I have lost for the last few months. And I'm trying to get it back, and I've lost another week here. But tomorrow we're going to be showing episode 5 of season 2 of The Cultists. Tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. I hope you will join us. And then after that, I know Brianna's going to be here. She was talking about that yesterday for the live after party. And our giveaway this week is War of Kings. This is the board game for kingdom building and conquest. And that's the first game that my brother and I designed. It's kind of a combination between Risk and Settlers of Catan. It's going to be given away tomorrow live at the after party, which will start about 7:40, just after the 7:30 show ends. All of the Cultists episodes are about 7 minutes long. I think we've got Grendel Games, Gravendal Games says, hi all, but hey, that might be Matt. Wrong account. Hi all. Hey, Matt. Welcome. So that's going on. If you have not already signed up for Ritual, that's coming soon. I've been putting out some posts on Facebook. I've got a Ravenkeep Facebook account. So check out Ravenkeep on Facebook. That's the publishing company that I set up for all of the games and action figures and stuffed animals and things like that we're creating here. I've been advertising what's going on Facebook because this is the Ritual board game. I just put the link to GameFound. This is how we are going to be funding Cultist Season 3 if we can do it. And I would really like to be able to do a Cultist Season 3 to wrap up our story. So we have created a Ritual, a cultist party game of spell casting and betrayal. You play the cultists. Your team is the loyal cultists, or you could be one of the agents of the Yellow that has infiltrated the band of loyal cultists. The loyal cultists must be able to successfully complete 5 different rituals. If they can, they win. If the cultists of the Yellow King, who are secretly among them, can foul up 3 rituals, they win. So please come here, click follow. I've been sending out messages because we're going to do another playtest review of the rules. I'm behind on that, but we're going to do another playtest review soon. So if you go down here, you can also sign up for the playtest right here. So if you'd like to get the rules in advance, because, hey, if you're hanging out here on Morning Grind, you probably like analyzing rules anyway. So if you sign up there, I'll be able to send you the rules in advance. And then we'll talk about them on Discord. I got a Discord server set up for that. So we'll send out the rules and then the invite to the Discord server. What else is going on? Anything else we should talk about as far as announcements go and things like that? Cultist is coming tomorrow. Yep. Okay. So I guess that's basically what is going on. It is good to see everybody this morning. Like I said, I've been trying to get more productive because, man, I have been extremely unproductive for what seems like months. And so I've been trying to get myself back on track. Went for a 3-mile walk yesterday. Been trying to get together a pack so I can go hiking and things like that and just have everything ready. And the pack's not ready yet, but it's still partially ready. So I loaded it up and I went for a 3-mile walk yesterday. I'm going to do it again today. Where is my Fate Core? Screen sharing. There it is. Okay. Whoop. There, finally. Okay, I got it. All right, so we're going to continue looking at Fate Core. Andrew says, sounds like fun. I think so. You know, I like doing things like that. I've got to get out more. I feel better and I'm more productive when I'm walking. So, or, you know, when I go out and actually do something active. So practice hikes right now are what I'm trying to do in order to stay active. Hope you do something like that too. And I think it'd be really great to just have a bag ready to go. So if I want to go out someplace for a while, I can just grab the bag and I don't have to really think about prep. I can just go. And I'm already practiced with the bag. Okay, so today I want to talk briefly about aspects and fate points. We did talk about fate points already, I believe, when we did this for the first time. So I don't want to recover that. But I do want to talk about what I like about aspects. So let's see here. Can you see everything on the screen? Yeah, okay. So we said that an aspect is a phrase that describes something unique or noteworthy about whatever it's attached to. They're the primary way you spend and gain fate points, and they influence story by providing an opportunity for characters to get a bonus, complicating a character's life, or adding to another character's role or passive opposition. And this point right here, noteworthy, something noteworthy about whatever it's attached to, is something that I really like, because in the context of a game, I think that you need to be able to clue your players in on what it is they should actually be paying attention to. And I think this is something of a flaw of many RPGs, that it doesn't clue you in on what you should focus in on. And now some people will say that's not a flaw, that's a feature. This is a role-playing game. And so that means that we're going to describe everything. We're going to give you all kinds of details. Not all of it's worth paying attention to for the actual, flow of the game or the story beats of the game. But hey, that's part of it. There's immersion in all of the detail. And then it's kind of up to you when you are analyzing what is going on to determine what is important and what is not. I've actually found that's a rather poor way to go, because people don't really know. I found that most players, including myself, when I'm like, sometimes I was in games where you only played once a month. So if you're giving a whole lot of detail, of course, I'm taking notes. I would take notes on a computer. We, that game we played at a computer or used a computer to run the digital screen anyway for our miniatures, our digital table. There's a video of where I put that together on the YouTube channel. So we did all have laptops, and I would type out notes so I would know what was going on. We could review the notes before the next session. And, we would also take into account, when you find the treasure hoard, what's in the treasure hoard? There's, this particular type of ivory statue that's, a well-carved statue of a whale. And then there's this other type of amulet or medallion or whatever. Then, of course, there's so many gold coins or silver coins, somebody's handkerchief or something like that. So we'd write all that down, and I would have all of that. But that didn't mean that all of that was significant to the story. Later, a few adventures later, you look at all the stuff you've written down and you're like, does any of this really matter? Well, probably it doesn't. And it's probably obscuring whatever I should have actually been paying attention to from month to month, from game to game. And so I like the idea that the aspects tell you what is noteworthy and what's in game and what should actually be worried about at any given time. That's why I like I got all kinds of index cards laying around. I like the index card method so that if there is something noteworthy about this room that you're in, like it's on fire or covered in slick slime or something like that, you write that on the index card and then you put that out on excuse me. You put that out on the table, and then that tells you that there's actually something noteworthy that is in game and is playable in that room. And the same way with your characters. What do I need to worry about with my character or the enemy's character? These are all defined by aspects. I'm a big fan of index cards for the on-the-fly kind of things, but I think that a system should have a set of cards that talks about all these different aspects that could be applied to your character or to dungeons or to rooms or things like that. I think there could be like a pack of cards that is your, classic dungeon pack or something. And these are all the different aspects of things that could be in rooms, that could be attached to monsters, or even, could be monsters themselves that you're putting in these cards. And that's drawing everybody's attention to exactly what's in play. When you're playing some kind of game and maybe you're doing a role-playing game, but you've got, a board out and you're looking at artistic things that are drawn on the board. Some players may want to know, is that in play? If I've drawn this old boot, like I'm thinking about on the Hero Quest board, if the old boot is drawn on the Hero Quest board and you're using that for an RPG, is that old boot in play? Is that something noteworthy? Is it something significant, or is it not? I like the idea that if it's an aspect, then it is, and if it's not, then it's not. Andrew says it's hard to get away from the machine, but it is fun. It is. And, I actually feel best when I am on a schedule and a routine. And that's actually why I started these live streams, kind of give me an anchor in the mornings. Hey, 9:30, let's be here and let's talk about tabletop and fantasy. And then hopefully I can start saying, hey, at a certain time, I go off and take a hike. And then later I go off and take a hike, but then maybe later we can get away for days. Inner Light says, I think that a lot of that should be determined by the setting and the type of characters wanted in that setting. Yes. Got to watch out for that slick slime. I think that's what I got. That's maybe what I got. The index card RPG, that's on my list of things to look at. And I've heard about that. That's come up a couple of times in the comments. And I was actually going to look at that sooner rather than later, but I don't actually have it. So I'm going to have to buy that. Because that is actually one that I want to look at before I continue more on what I'm doing. I think Index Card RPG is a good system, Trey says. So, yeah, I want to look at that one. That one is on the short list. So that's what I wanted to talk about as far as aspects, because there are game aspects, character aspects, situation aspects, consequences are aspects. Boosts are a little bit different, but they're like aspects. They're like temporary aspects. And then we're going through. I do also like the idea that most things, aspects are best if double-edged. Say more than one thing and keep phrasing simple, so that they can both be used as an advantage, but also something as a compel. It might be something good. It might be something bad. Like we said, being chieftain of the Dunedain certainly has its advantages. If that's your aspect chieftain of the Dunedain of the North, that has advantages, but it also has disadvantages because obviously bad guys want to kill you, as a simple example. So let's keep going. I think that's all I wanted to say about add to our discussion on aspects. Skills and stunts. We talked a lot about skills last time and how I think I would change that up to kind of an attribute system. We got deep into that. Trey has something to say on aspects. Trey says, so aspects are descriptions, room on fire, or mechanical advantages, loose footing. They are descriptions of the room. They will give you mechanical advantages or mechanical disadvantages. So room on fire might be the description of the room. That's the unique or noteworthy aspect of that room. Room on fire. Now, that could give you an advantage. Like if you were to say, I've got an arrow and the room is on fire down there, but I'm not on fire up here. But the bad guys are in the room on fire. And so I'm going to shoot the bad guys down there. So you could use a fate point. You're going to roll your attack, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But you're going to roll your attack. And then if you want to increase the roll, then you could say, hey, now wait a minute. I'm shooting down there. It's not like the bad guys are looking up at me. They're actually having to run from the fire. They're not paying attention to what I'm doing. So it's actually advantageous to me if the room is on fire down there. So I'm going to use room on fire because the bad guys are distracted to give me a bonus to shooting at them. So that would be a way that's the fate things are also, the aspects can also be double-sided. So room's on fire in that situation. If you're shooting down at the bad guys, that would be good for you because it might give you a bonus. But on the other hand, if you're in the room, then it might be bad for you because the game master could do the same thing and use that against you because the room is on fire. You're not paying attention and you could be hit more easily. So they are descriptions that can have a variety of mechanical effects. It's basically up to the players or the game master to determine how that aspect is going to influence whatever situation we are in right now. So that's that. And I like them loose like that. So, the slippery ice would be an example. So that might give you loose footing or slippery footing in a situation. Trey says, cool. Aspects are like the key to fate, and I don't feel like the core book helped me much when I read it the first time. Right. I don't think it does either. And I think that was one of the very first things that I had said about fate, that one of the reasons, one of the disadvantages, I think, is that the language of it is very unclear. Because I didn't get it either when I first read through it. I learned fate really when I played with a game master who really likes fate, and he does a fantastic job running it. So it really clicks. The system really clicks with him, and he explained it. And then I went back and read the books again, and I went, oh, okay, I suppose now I understand what they're trying to say. But I don't think it's clear in many circumstances. On at least a first read through. So these are your basic game actions. Overcome, create an advantage, attack, or defend. Okay, so overcome, that's like you jump over the pit. So I got to roll a certain number to jump over the pit. Pretty clear. Attack is also pretty clear. You try to harm someone in a conflict. That harm may be physical, mental, emotional, or social in nature. So it's not necessarily all of a sudden always hitting them with a club, but you're trying to harm them in order to take them out of at least a scene by harming them physically, mentally, emotionally, or socially. Okay, so I think overcome and attack are pretty straightforward. Create an advantage is not always. When you're discovering something that already exists about an opponent or creating a situation that helps you, let me start over with that. When you're discovering something that already exists about an opponent or creating a situation that helps you succeed, creating advantages allows you to discover and create aspects and lets you get free invocations of them. This might be an example. If I'm looking at that example of I'm up on the balcony, the room's on fire down there, and there are bad guys, and I want to increase my chance of killing the bad guys when I attack, I might want to aim. Aiming would be creating an advantage. So I'm going to try to aim. Now the bad guy, so I would write down on a card, I have a new aspect. Sometimes you have to roll to create an advantage. But let's say that maybe I do have to make some kind of light roll or something like that. But now I've aimed, and so now the target is in my sights. And so I wrote target is in my sights. That's a new aspect that is on me right now. And then when I attack, I could invoke not only target is in my sights, but also target is on fire and get additional bonuses. You're really trying to stack up all of these bonuses. And that's actually also something that I like about this game. And Lou and I talked about it. I highly recommend you take a look at my video where I did Table Talk with Lou Anders. I interviewed Lou Anders. He's the one who I think is really good at running Fate. We discussed Fate quite a bit, and he talked about how this kind of combat simulates storytelling, that it's not about trying to just wear down a whole bunch of hit points. But think about most action movies or things like that. You're not wearing down hit points. You are trying to accumulate as many advantages as you possibly can, and then you cash in a whole bunch of fate points on those advantages and overcome your bad guy. So it's making you think about how can I create advantages for myself that's going to allow me to overcome the enemy, rather than just attack, wear off hit points, D6 by D6 by D6. That's what I don't like. And I think Fate does do that well. Fate does allow you to do that well. A problem, though, is that sometimes it's not exactly clear what create an advantage is. And this was a sticking point that came up when we were testing this for Journey to the Tree of Sorrows RPG. We wanted to disable somebody. And we're like, how do we model this? We wanted to, we had a sniper up in the mountains or whatever, and there was the person down there, and we wanted to shoot him, but he intentionally just wanted to shoot to make a leg shot to disable that person. Well, ordinarily, that would be an attack. Like if you're going to shoot somebody, you're trying to make an attack. But what we were trying to do is disable them. So that was more like putting a aspect on them, leg injured. That's what we were trying to do. He was trying to put leg injured on that person down there, the aspect leg injured. Now, leg injured could be a consequence of an attack. Because if you attack somebody and they start taking damage and they take enough damage, there's going to be a consequence of that attack. And so the consequence could be leg injured. But in this case, we were trying to it seemed like circumvent the attack and just put on leg injured, which sounds like an advantage, but it has to be done through an attack. And that messed us up. So I think we need additional clarification about creating this advantage. Attack and then defend. Defend, though, is also the weird one here, because defend is not done on your turn. Defend is your response. You try to keep someone from harming you, getting past you, or creating an advantage to use against you. So defend is an action, but it's a response action. And I think we talked about, and I think the first episode where we were discussing Fate, I do tend to like active defense systems. If you just ask me, if you're designing a system, do you have active or passive defense? I would say, well, probably let's have active defense, because I think that allows the players and so forth to feel more active in the game, rather than just the bad guys rolled against your armor class, they hit you, take this amount of damage. You have an opportunity to defend. And I think that probably also comes from starting the very first game that I started with like this was Hero Quest, where there was active defense. However, from a game design standpoint, it is certainly possible that defend is unnecessary. Now, a disadvantage of the defend action is that you're doubling all of the necessary rolls in anytime you're fighting, right? Because you've got to make an attack roll, and then you got to make a defense roll. And so, you've got to get the other player ready. You've got the GM has to be engaged. And you double the number of rolls and make it more complicated. And so it takes more time. So if you're trying to make something really hard hitting and fast, you might want to drop this. So in that case, it kind of surprises me that I have defend here. I also found when I was designing things that if you've got the same random element on both sides of the attack and the defense, you're basically canceling each other out, right? Especially in situations like we've discussed in other videos with the D20. The D20 is this huge random range. In many cases, we have rather small modifiers. Even +7 or +8 is a comparatively small modifier to a D20 roll because you're getting 1 to 20. I mean, if you want the D20 to be not significant, you need to be adding +30, +40, +50, to an attack roll. And then your random element is only a range of 20. If your random element is a range of 20, but your known element is only a range of +2 to +8, you're overwhelmingly random. So if you were to say, hey, I've got a +4 to attack and you've got a +5 to defend, I'll roll my +4 to attack and I will roll a D20 and add that to it. You take your +5 defense and add D20 to that. And then we will see whoever's highest, either I hit you or you defend. Well, yes, in any one particular attack, what's mattering most is how well we're rolling D20s, because I got a +4, you got a +5, so you're only ahead of me by +1. What's really mattering is how well we roll these D20s. Sometimes I'll roll well, you'll roll badly. Sometimes I'll roll badly, you'll roll well, and other times we'll roll about the same. Those D20 rolls over the course of the game are basically canceling each other out. So I actually now, from a game design perspective, prefer for there only to be one random element in an action. This person is trying to attack that person. Here's this person's attack statistics. Here are this person's defend statistics. And then there will only be one element of defense. One random element in there, which is the roll of whatever dice system we end up choosing to use. That one random roll is going to determine everything that is random or not accounted for on both the attacker and the defender side for that entire action. That way you're not canceling stuff out and things like that. That does mean that typically you would give up active defense. But from a game design perspective, I think the math and statistics on that is cleaner. And it does make the game go a bit faster. Let's see, we got some comments here. Access Your Inner Light says, so when writing an RPG, try to write it from the perspective of a gamer, not a rules authoritarian. In other words, where's the fun? Keep it upfront and personal. Yeah, I think so. I've played a lot of simulation types of games, and I do appreciate that, and I have a lot of background in that. But on the other hand, we need to remember that I think that this is a game, which does have to do with the aspects, like what is important in this game. Don't give me a list of everything in this guy's pockets if it's not significant or noteworthy. Give me what's significant in the game, and then make sure people are having fun. I had another thought on that, but I guess it escaped me. I was going to say, actually, I think that's why in a lot of cases, board games get out on my table more often than RPGs. So if I'm creating one, I kind of want to think in terms of, I want this to get out on the table. I'm probably going to be playing with a variety of different types of people, often who aren't hardcore RPG gamers. I'm also often thinking about my nephews. Like, I want to take my nephews on an adventure, so that we should do that in an RPG. But it seems like if I want to do that, the things that get out on the table most for me are things like Hero Quest or Zombicide. I'm a big fan of Zombicide. Zombicide Black Plague is the version that I played the most. I love Zombicide. It gives the feeling of running from zombies. You get it out, you put it out on the table, you're playing fast, you play, you're playing quickly, you get playing quickly. You don't have to go through character design. You play for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. You've had a great adventure, then you put it back in the box. If I could do something like that with an RPG, there are, other advantages to an RPG because you can be more free form. That's one advantage. And you could take people on a great adventure, but not if you get bogged down. So I'm definitely thinking, what you're talking about right here, upfront, personal, exciting game. Let's be able to get this RPG on the table, play it fast, and enjoy ourselves. Trey says, I think it is into the odd that does not use hit rolls and just has you roll defense against the attacker's damage roll. Okay, so that is another thing that you could do. You may always be rolling defense, so you could swap it. It doesn't have to be if you're only using one roll. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a hit roll. It could be a defend roll. I went through the One Ring on the channel. So if you go through, I've got some read-throughs of the One Ring role-playing game, which is the new Middle Earth role playing game, and I'm a huge fan of Middle Earth, so I picked that up. I haven't gotten to play it yet, but also it doesn't have symmetry. You don't always have to be thinking about symmetry in terms of your PCs and your NPCs, your good guys and your bad guys. If I'm thinking simulationist, then I am, right? That, well, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Whatever these guys can do, these guys can do. I'm not necessarily thinking about that so much anymore. I don't have a problem with there being asymmetry between these are the main characters, the PCs sitting here at the table. This is how they operate. And then the NPCs and other people, in the game world operate according to different rules. So there's asymmetry in that between attack and defense, between the good guys and the bad guys in the One Ring. Because I was thinking what you could do is you could say, in order to keep the players rolling the dice, you could have the players, when they attack, they always roll to hit. So they're rolling once and they are rolling to hit their foes. On the other hand, when the foes attack the players roll defense. You could do that. That way, if you're being attacked, you go roll to defend yourself, and then you roll to defend yourself. That does keep the player engaged. The player is always active. The player feels like they have a chance to defend themselves, but you're still just having one die. You could do something like that. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Trey says, for kids, I would recommend No Thank You Evil or Amazing Tales. Oh, we got more recommendations here. I'm going to write those down since this is in a comment here. Especially for kids. Now, I have played Fate Accelerated with kids and had fantastic adventures. No Thank You Evil. No Thank You Evil. And then Amazing Tales. Because I really want to be able to take my nephews on exciting adventures for 2 or 3 hours in an RPG. And I have another video on the channel where I discussed the board gaming weekend I had with my oldest, he's not actually my oldest nephew, but one of my older nephews. And he did want to play Dungeons and Dragons. And so I played that. And I talked about how we played Dungeons and Dragons. I pushed it toward the fun. I mean, it was an intense, we didn't do character creation. We had pre-generated characters, and pushed it toward fun, and, did that. And I think we had a great time, but I think we could do even better adventures with some other systems, I think. Okay. So I think that's what we have to say about attacking and defending. So, a stunt, I'm not going to go over that too much, but these are also, a stunt is a special trait your character has that changes the way a skill works for you. A special fighting technique or something like that is something that a stunt would be. Let's just skip by that, though. Again, that's one of those things that wasn't exactly clear to me how I defined one of those when I first read through. But they're basically like a special ability or a feat or something. Challenges. Where do I want to skip to? What to do, scene sessions. Zooming in on the action. I want to talk about how it handles conflict and combat here. Trey also says, oh, Quest is great too, and it's free now, I think, for the base game PDF. Quest. So we do have different challenges, contests, and conflicts. This is kind of like, well, it seems like most games today have different ways of overcoming some type of obstacle, whether you've got some type of somebody actively opposing you, whether or not it's some kind of passive opposition, or if you actually have to go in stages, because I do think that's important to be able to have partial success. Seems like there are lots of things when you're trying to accomplish something, but you might need partial success. And so that's when you might have something, I believe that's called a challenge in Fate. But, being able to achieve partial success is a lot like wearing down hit points. I'm going to kill this orc with my sword. Okay, that's your overall outcome, but you may only have partial success, right? You may only be able to take away a few hit points. And so it seems like several different games have that in here. Have that ability to have something that can be partially successful. So resolving attacks. Okay, so basically what happens when we are attacking something, we roll our attack roll, and then you roll the defense roll. And then here is how you resolve the attack. A successful attack lands a hit equivalent to its shift value on the target. Now here is some additional strange terminology in Fate. A successful attack lands a hit equivalent to its shift value on the target. So if you get 3 shifts on an attack, you land a 3 shift hit. Okay, so what is that? That was probably explained earlier in challenges and contests. The number of shifts is the difference between your attack and defense roll. So if I roll an 8 and you roll a 5, that's a 3 shift attack. I don't know why I would use that terminology. I would just say that, okay, the difference between the attack roll is 3. The attack roll and the defense roll is 3. So you score 3 hits of damage on your opponent. I think it's probably, I mean, it could have something to do with saying, well, we need some way to use terminology that is general enough that we can describe not only combat, but we can describe any other situation where your degree of success might matter. And so I suppose we'll say, okay, we're going to call those shifts. In the instance of combat, your shifts become points of damage. Your number of hits. That might be that might be what they were thinking, but it still gives you some strange terminology here. If you get hit by an attack, one of 2 things happen. Either you absorb the hit and stay in the fight, or you are taken out. Fortunately, you have 2 options for absorbing hits to stay in the fight. You can take stress or consequences. You can also concede a conflict before you're taken out in order to preserve some control over what happens to your character. And generally, I like this. We've got stress, we've got consequences, then you can be taken out, or you might concede. So stress, one of the best options to mitigate stress or mitigate the effects of a hit is to take stress. And you have physical and mental stress tracks on your character. And this is how much physical stress if you're like being hit with a club, or mental stress if you're taking some type of fatigue damage, or maybe some kind of psychic damage or magical damage or something like that. And Inner Light says, yes, I'm developing a partial success system for my game as well. To me, partial success is kind of just like hit points taking down that orc. You were only partially successful in killing that orc. And in fact, it's kind of like the same thing right here. Well, I attacked. Was I able to take out, instead of kill, we'll say take out that orc? No, I wasn't. I was only partially successful because he took stress. Now, not all like your bad guys are going to have stress tracks. They may just be taken out on hits, but this is kind of like partial success. So by default, all characters get a 1 point and a 2 point stress box. And I believe this is something that was changed in Fate Condensed, because it doesn't operate exactly like hit points here, because it's not like you have 8 points of stress and then you just deplete that. I took 3 points of stress. Now I have 5 points of stress left. This is a stress box that can absorb 1 point of damage. This is a box that can absorb 2 points of damage. So if I get hit for 1 point of damage, I can check off my 1 point box. If I get hit for another 1 point of damage, I can check off my 2 point box. But then I've used a 2 point box that could have absorbed 2 points of stress for just 1 point, but that's okay. That way I didn't have to take consequences. If I get hit for 3 points of damage, I might check my 2 point box and have 1 point get through to take consequences with. People have been saying this is one of the things that you've got to talk to people most about because people are, to make sure they're not confused, because most people want to intuitively use stress tracks like hit points. Oh, I got so many of them, and then just deplete them. Whereas no, like this over here, if you have a 3-point stress box, that would absorb 3 points of stress. This would absorb 4 points of stress. Now, an advantage to that, I suppose, is that if you're hit 4 times and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 points of stress, if you're hit 4 times for 4 points of, if you're hit 4 times for 1 point of stress each, that still eliminates all 4 of your stress boxes. Yeah, you had to use a 4-point stress box to absorb one of those 1-point stresses, but that's limiting the number of times you can be hit. If I had 8 points of stress and they were like hit points, every time I'm hit for 1, I still have 4 points left. So I think what this does is it's reducing the number of hits that you can take. Although you can, if you get walloped for 4 points, well, boom, 4-point stress box. You can still take 3 more hits. Fate Condensed does just go to more like a hit point system for your stress, and you just check them off like hit points. That might be easier. It might be more intuitive to people. It might be the way I go. I don't know. That's probably is the most intuitive to most gamers. How much have you got left? It's like hit points. It says, remember, you have 2 sets of stress boxes. One of these is for physical stress. The other is for mental. If you start with a 1-shift or a 2-shift box, you start with a 1-shift and a 2-shift box in each of these. If you take stress from a physical source, check off the physical stress. If you take a mental hit, check off the mental stress. After a conflict, when you get a minute to breathe, any stress boxes you check off become available to use again. And so here are some examples of checking off different stress boxes as you take different points of damage. Now, consequences. I do love this. Consequences. Let's see. I got some comments here before I go into those. Trey says, stress in core is not bad. It's just something that is unique to Fate core, and I believe is in Fate Accelerated. Yeah, I think Fate Accelerated also has the stress boxes that operate like this. I think it's Fate Condensed that has the hit points like stress boxes. I think the confusion is why they went to a point system in Condensed. Yeah, I think so. I think you're exactly right. So consequences. And like I said, this is one of my favorite parts of combat because I do like things like conditions, I said in other videos, and I like things like consequences. The second option you have for mitigating a hit is taking a consequence. A consequence is more severe than stress. Because remember, stress is going away as soon as you have a minute to breathe. So basically, as soon as you kind of get out of a scene. A consequence is more severe than stress. It represents some form of lasting injury or setback that you accrue from the conflict, something that's going to be a problem for your character after the conflict is over. And this has to do, I think, with making sure that combat, or a component of making sure that combat is significant. Because I think I've said in a previous video, one of the things that I don't like about endless D&D combat, roll to hit, take off D6 hit points, roll to hit, take off D6 hit points, roll to hit, do it again, around and around in a circle, that can sometimes take a very long time sitting there at the table, is that the combat probably is not going to be all that significant or actually going to matter all that much. Because we said, how many combats are you expected to go through? How many combat encounters are you expected to have going from 1st level to 20th level? A lot. A lot. Are you going to remember all of those? Are they all significant? Like if I'm sitting there at the table and we're playing, a long grind of a D&D battle, and it's not really even going to matter because I'm going to get my hit points back at the end of this, and I'm going to get my spells back pretty soon and all of that, just do a short rest. It's probably not even going to matter. So one of the ways to do that is that when you enter battle or any type of conflict, whether that is mental or physical, you must, you have the potential to suffer a consequence which could be lasting. And there are consequences come in 3 levels of severity: mild, moderate, and severe. Each one has a different shift value, 2, 4, and 6 respectively. On your character sheet, you have a number of available consequence slots in this section. Consequences: mild, moderate, and severe. That's how much damage each one can take up. So if you're hit by a gigantic 6 points of damage and you have no more stress left, then you got to take a severe consequence as a matter of that. When you use the consequence slot, you reduce your shift value of the attack by the shift value of the consequence. You may use more than one consequence at a time if they're available. Any of the hit's remaining shifts must be handled by stress boxes to avoid being taken out. If you have stress that you can't account for, either because of your stress box, or you have hits rather, that you can't account for because of your consequences or your stress boxes, then you are taken out. That's not necessarily dead, but you are taken out of that scene. You're out of the fight. Here's the penalty. However, there's a penalty. The consequence written on the slot is an aspect. It's an aspect. Consequences are aspects that represents a lasting effect occurred by the attack. The opponent who forced you to take a consequence gets a free invocation. The free invocation means that that opponent can immediately use it against you. If you put broken arm in here, then the opponent on the next turn may immediately use that against you without having to pay a fate point. I'm attacking you again, and this time you are wincing in pain because you have a broken arm. And the aspects remain on your character sheet until you've recovered the consequence slot. When it's on your sheet, the consequence is treated like any other aspect, except because the slant on it is so negative, it's far more likely to be used to your character's detriment. So that's what Trey was asking again, like, is an aspect positive or negative, or is it something descriptive? It is something descriptive, but in this case, your description is, so it could be positive. Even a consequence could potentially be positive, but because it is so negatively written, it's more likely to be used to your character's detriment. I like that too. Like you might have a, if you're trying to simulate being some kind of pathetic character to sneak into some place like a beggar, and you happen to have injured arm because of a consequence, maybe in that case, that could help you kind of sell it. So I like that. I really like this system. Unlike stress, a consequence may take a long time to recover after the conflict is over. Also, unlike stress, you only have one set of consequences. This is important. You've got mental and physical on stress, but there aren't specific slots for physical versus mental consequences. This means that if you have taken a mild consequence to reduce a mental hit and your mild consequence slot is already filled with physical consequence, you are out of luck. You're going to have to use a moderate or severe consequence to absorb a hit, assuming that you have one left. The exception to this is the extra consequence slot will get from a superb to you will get from a superb or physical will is reserved for physical or mental harm, respectively. That's a bonus slot you get for having a really high stat in that area. Still better than taken out, right? Now, so instance right here, this guy's getting attacked. Cyrene gets teamed up on by 3 thugs during the exchange, and with the help of a huge die roll and some situation aspects, they manage to land a 6-shift attack on her. She's escaped harm so far this fight, and still has all of her stress boxes and consequences available. She has 2 ways to take the hit. She could take 1 severe consequence, which negates 6 stress. She could also take a moderate consequence, 4 stress, and use her 2-point stress box. She decides that it's not likely she's going to get hit for that much again, so she takes the severe consequence to help her keep her stress track open for smaller hits. Amanda and Lily agree to call the severe consequence nearly gutted. So nearly gutted goes down in 6. Cyrene takes a wicked slash from one of the thug's swords, gritting her teeth through the pain. Now, here's one of the disadvantages to this system. You got to come up with this on the fly. I was attacked by a club, or I was hit with a fire extinguisher blast, or I was attacked with a sword, or had some type of trap hit me or whatever. And if I'm taking a consequence, we got to come up with that kind of on the fly. What does that moderate consequence mean? Here is another reason why, another opportunity, I think, that cards would be so useful. That I would like to have a stack of cards with me as the game master, because his players, I find, get hung up on this. That, okay, take a consequence. Okay, well, what happened to me? That actually slows things down, having to think of something right there. And that's when I don't want to have to think of something. I want to be able to just apply it. So I think there needs to be a pack of cards again that has mild consequences, moderate consequences, and severe consequences. And they can have tags on them up on the top for things like bludgeoning attack, or edged weapon attack, or poison gas attack, or something like that. So they can be easily kind of found, and you kind of organize these as a game master. And I was actually thinking that you could even have some type of stand or something like that where you put these so that everybody can grab them. So, and then you could just deal one out randomly. Oh, moderate edged weapon damage. Grab one of those cards. There you go. And slap it down on your character. There's your consequence. It's already got a cool description written on it. So you can sit down and think of all kinds of different things, narrative ways you might describe that damage for that consequence. You know, it's a 6-point problem or a 4-point problem if it's moderate. And it kind of matches the theme of edged weapon damage. I would like to do that. That gets you narrative description of combat. It gets you unique consequences for lasting consequences potentially for fights, and it gets it to you rather quickly. It gives you some naming conventions because, okay, so mild consequences don't require immediate medical attention. They hurt, they may present an inconvenience, but they aren't going to force you into a lot of bed rest. Black eye. On the mental side, mild consequences express things like small gaps or changes in your surface emotions. Black eye, bruised hand, winded, flustered, cranky, temporarily blinded. Moderate consequences represent fairly serious impairments that require dedicated effort toward recovery. See, this is one of those things that I feel like we have to check this. Oh, you take a moderate consequence. Okay, now what was a moderate consequence again? Okay, it represents fairly serious impairments that require dedicated effort to recovery. So please think of that on the fly, including medical attention. On the mental side, they express things like damage to your reputation or emotional problems that you can't just shrug off with an apology and a good night's sleep. Deep cut, first-degree burn, exhausted, drunk, terrified. This is why this is actually something I want to think about outside of the game and have prepped on cards. Severe consequences are go straight to the emergency room or whatever the equivalent is in your game. They're extremely nasty and prevent you from doing a lot of things and will lay you out for a while. Second-degree burn, compound fracture, guts hanging out, crippling shame, trauma-induced phobia. Let's go over here to the comments. Trey says, I love how Fate and Cortex Prime deal with consequences. I have not gone through the Cortex Prime book myself yet, but I'm going to. I want to do that soon because I think there are things that can be really great from that. I really like how the Dragon Prince, which is based on Cortex. I haven't been through the Prime Cortex book, but I have not. But I have gone through the Dragon Prince role-playing game, and recovering from consequences in Dragon Prince sounds really good too. It requires other people to help you, which does fit the theme of that TV show very well. You know, if you're really suffering from something down, you may not be able to pull yourself out of it. One of your teammates has to come and pull yourself out of it. So I think there are lots of opportunities for really great narrative, story-driven kinds of things with this approach. That's why I'm excited about this, because when I'm reading these parts of Fate, I'm going, yes, this is how I want to be able to tell one of these games. There's some hiccups. Like I said, I want to think about the consequences names outside of combat. I don't have to do that in the middle of battle. So I think we need to prep those kinds of things. But then there are other parts of Fate where I'm like, this other parts aren't quite fitting together right. So Fate, that's why I say that Fate is almost there for me, but I think it needs improvement. I think there's something we can do, and we can pull some things from Cortex Prime, I think, and some other things to really make it shine, I think. Inner Light says, one of the things I like about, I believe that's Hero Quest, is that all combat seem potentially fatal, and using magic definitely is a bit more serious than D&D. Combat if that is Hero Quest, I like that you can you can lose a lot of hit points really fast in Hero Quest combat. Trey says, so if you have the full group written in, do you take 12 shifts of negatives? I think you're talking about consequences here. So, yes, like here, you would have, if you had all of them written in, you would have 12 shifts worth of negative consequences on you. One of them would be mild, so it could be gotten rid of faster. One of them could be gotten rid of, at a moderate amount of time, and one of them is going to be much worse. But yeah, that'd be 12 shifts of negatives on you. Amen to having less open-ended things in RPGs. I can understand why Fate has it as it seems to want the players to create everything about their characters instead of having them defined by the game. Yeah, see, that's, to me, that is exactly one of the paradoxes, I guess, of RPGs, because its extreme advantage is that it's open-ended. So, you can leave the confines of the board game. That's an extreme advantage to an RPG. We can go on, you know, the cliche, you can do whatever you want, right? But on the other hand, that does come with some extreme negatives if it is taking a lot of time and people are not actually that creative on the fly. That's why a board game, to me, like Zombicide, can take people on an adventure often much more effectively than an RPG. But I want to take all the good parts of the RPG, which is its general open-ended nature, but constrain its open-ended nature and get people in a more board game type fashion. At least that's the way I perceive it. Keep the great things about being open-ended, but then scale back everything else to make it more playable. So, recovering from consequences. In order to regain the use of a consequence slot, typically I like to go for about an hour here, but I kind of want to finish this because I don't want to have to come back to it. And this is part that I really like about it. And I think we could basically wrap up Fate if we're talking about consequences here. So in order to talk about the rest of combat here, in order to regain the use of a consequence slot, you have to recover from the consequence. That requires two things: succeeding in an action that allows you to justify recovery, and then waiting the appropriate amount of game time for the recovery to take place. And Trey may be right that Cortex may have a better mechanic here. And also, like I said, I was looking at Dragon Prince for recovery that is also pretty cool. The action in question is an overcome action. You have an obstacle is the consequence that you took. If it's a physical injury, then the action is some kind of medical treatment or first aid. For mental consequences, the action may simply involve therapy, counseling, or simply, simply a night out with friends. The difficulty depends on the consequence. Mild is fair, moderate is great, and severe is fantastic. That's the difficulty levels of the challenge. If you are trying to perform the recovery action on yourself, increase the difficulty steps by 2 on the ladder. So that does make it easier for other people to help you out. Keep in mind that the circumstances have to be appropriately free of distraction and tension for you to get the roll going in the first place. You're not going to clean and bandage a nasty cut while ogres are tromping through the caves looking for you. GMs, you've got the final call. To succeed at the recovery action, or someone else succeeds on the recovery action for you, you get to rename the consequence aspect to show that it's in recovery. So, for instance, broken leg could become stuck in a cast. Scandalized could become damage control, and so on. This is also something I'd want to think of outside of the game, and you could do if you had time for that. So if you do have broken leg, and you get dealt broken leg because you took concussion damage, and that's a moderate consequence or whatever, later it's going to become the 2 point. It would just tell you on there degrades to stuck in cast. It would just tell you that on the card. We didn't have to come up with this on the fly again. So here's your time. For a mild consequence, you only have to wait 1 whole scene after the recovery action, and then you can remove the aspect and clear the slot. For moderate consequences, you have to wait 1 whole session after the recovery action, which means if you do the recovery action in the middle of a session, you should recover someplace in the middle of the next session. For a severe consequence, you have to rate 1 whole scenario after the recovery. Now, you can drink potions too or whatever, of course. Now, extreme consequences. In addition to the normal set of mild, moderate, and severe consequences, every PC also gets 1 last-ditched option to stay in a fight, the extreme consequence. And this does sound very narrative, doesn't it? Between major milestones, you can only use this option once. Between major milestones. Now, that's like your places where you go up in the experience or whatever. So between major milestones, you can only use this option once. An extreme consequence will absorb up to 8 shifts of a hit, but at a very serious cost. You must replace one of your aspects, except the high concept, that's off limits, with the extreme consequence. That's right. An extreme consequence is so serious that taking it literally changes who you are. And again, that's another reason why combat could matter. All right. You could have a consequence so extreme in this battle that it could change who you are. Unlike other consequences, you can't make a recovery action to diminish an extreme consequence. You're stuck with it until your next major milestone. After that, you can rename the extreme consequence to reflect that you're no longer vulnerable to the worst of it, as long as you don't just switch it out for whatever your old aspect was. So old aspect off the limits. Taking an extreme consequence is a permanent change to your character. Treat it as such. And then you also have the option of conceding in conflict. When all else fails, you may just give in. Maybe you're worried that you can't absorb another hit, or maybe you decide that continuing to fight is not worth the punishment. Whatever the reason, you can interrupt any action at any time before the roll is made to declare that you concede the conflict. This is super important. Once the dice hit the table, whatever happens, happens, and you're either taking more stress, suffering more consequences, or being taken out. So you have to say that you concede prior to rolling your dice. Concession gives the other person what they want from you, or in the case of more than 2 combatants, removes you as a concern for the opposing side. You're out of the conflict, period. But it's not all bad. First of all, you get a fate point for choosing to concede. On top of that, if you've sustained any consequences in the conflict, you get an additional fate point for each consequence. These fate points may be used when the conflict is over. Second, you get to avoid the worst part of your fate. Yes, you lost. The narration has to reflect that. But you can't use this privilege to undermine this opponent's victory either. You say what happens to you must pass muster with the group. That can make the difference between saying being mistakenly left for dead and ending up in the enemy's hands, in shackles, without any of your stuff. That sort of thing can happen if you're taken out instead. That's not nothing. So the other option then is you are taken out. If you don't have enough stress or consequences left, if you let the dice hit the table, you didn't concede, the dice hit the table, you don't have any ability to take more shifts of damage, you are taken out. Being taken out is bad. It not only means that you can't fight anymore, but that the person who takes you out gets to decide what your loss looks like and what happens to you after the conflict. If you concede, you get to decide what happens to you. If you get taken out, they have to decide. Obviously, they can't narrate anything that's outside the scope of the conflict, like having you die from shame, but that still gives someone else a lot of power over your character they can't really do anything about, that you can't do anything about, which could include death. So if you think about it, there's not a whole lot keeping someone from saying after you're taking it out, your character dies. But it could be other things, like being chained up, taken prisoner, all of that. Fate does use zones for movement, which I'm also a fan of. And I went over zone combat. I used Terra Tiles to demonstrate zone combat in the One Ring. Actually, I think I've got a video called The Best Terrain for Fate, which we discuss zone movement. So there is already a video on the channel which is discusses zone movement. And I'm also a big fan of zone movement. I'm not going to go into it detail here, but rather than tracking individual squares or whatever, like you've got, this is zone 1, zone 2. If you're more than one zone away, you got to use ranged weapons. If you're in the same zone, you can hit each other with melee weapons. That is basically combat in Fate. And like I said, generally, I'm a fan of all of those parts. Innerlight says, exactly, it's a board game RPG, maybe a new game genre. Well, maybe. You know, there are going to be different degrees of these things, because certainly Zombicide Black Plague is on one level. I have not gotten to play Monster, Kingdom Death Monster. I got that sitting over here. I've got to be able to play more games. I also live kind of far away from people who I would play with. So it's kind of hard to get together. But I've got Kingdom Death Monster. You know, that's kind of in a category. And then also, of course, Gloomhaven is also similar. But yeah, it could be. I'm trying to do the more RPG side of that. That's definitely the board game version of an RPG. What is the RPG what is the RPG version of a board game? Maybe that's the new the genre. Role-playing board game. Yeah. This is the board game role-playing game. This is the role-playing board game. One of those. Yep. Fair warning, the Cortex Prime book is more of a toolbox to make the game you like it. This is Trey here. Fair warning, the Cortex Prime book is more toolbox to make the game you like rather than it is a system. You build all the things that are important for your game, very modular. Right. I did kind of pick that up as I just thumbed through it. That, yeah, when I was looking at different ways to do actions and attributes and things like that, it gives you different options. And that's why, I mean, what they did is take that Cortex Prime book and then build out all of the options for the dedicated Dragon Prince role-playing game. Which is exactly what I wish they would let people do more of for GURPS, like I was saying. GURPS is the toolbox. So Cortex Prime and GURPS seem to be equivalent on that level. But neither one of those companies really lets third parties easily create additional role-playing games that can be published with their system, which is a negative. I think that basically says everything that I want to say about Fate Core. I guess we'll be moving on next time. There are probably some other things we can say. Probably, like we said, experience points and leveling up and things like that we may want to talk about. But I think we come up with another topic for tomorrow. We move on. But I think that was a good overview. If you're not familiar with Fate, maybe that was a good overview. If you were trying to design something kind of like I am, you can kind of at least see why there is so much of that I like. But on the other hand, there's some things that just are not crystallizing quite right for me. So, all right. I hope that everybody has a very productive day. Thank you so much for being here with me live. If you are watching this in replay, thank you so much. I hope you were enjoying it as well. Please leave comments. I will respond. I look at all the comments that come through on YouTube. So if you're watching in replay, definitely feel free to comment and add something to the conversation. I would love to have that. So I will see you hopefully tomorrow. In the meantime, be productive. I'm going to go write. I'm going to do RPGs. Yep, have a great day. I will see you live tomorrow morning and then especially tomorrow night. Remember to be here tomorrow night for the cultists and the live after party and the giveaway. All right, be productive.